Hi and welcome to my tech talk about from Figma to implementation. We're going to talk about a bit of insight, what we're doing, how to get from the design stages to the implementation stages, and what the customer actually wants. But first, a bit about myself. I am Julian Zauner. I work at CADS in Perg, and we develop software for surgical planning, for surgeons, for patients in order to make their life easier. The software we do is 3D imaging software, so we take images from MRI machines, CT machines, present them to the surgeon. They can actually do the planning of their surgery in there, and then do the actual operation later. That's not the only thing we do. There's some planning stuff as well, but I think the most interesting and the one I am focused on is surgery planning. A bit about myself. I studied in the University of Applied Science. I studied media technology and design, focused a lot of game design and a lot of programming, of course. And after 5 years, I went over to the Future Lab, did a lot of interactive media installations, some small games and stuff. And for 3 years now, I've been employed at CADS and work as an active software developer. And for about a year now, I've been tech lead in 2 separate projects, which one is our UI component lib, which I'm responsible for, and do a lot of development myself, of course. And this planning software for the surgery, which I'm also tech lead in. My main responsibilities are, again, development of 2D and 3D features, so how the actual surgeon, the customer interacts with our software. I do some algorithms, although I'm not the expert in those topics. We have some smart people working behind the scenes. And just make sure that everything stays consistent within our application. So what I'm actually want to talk about today is a bit of the design process behind some UI components. Oftentimes, the design, there's essentially 3 parts in the chain from the design to the customer, which is the designer, the developer, which is me in this case, and the customer as a final component. And we need to bridge this gap from designer to the customer somehow, because there's often a bit of friction there. So first off, what does the designer actually do? I picked a very simple example here, but typically the designer thinks about a lot of things. This is layout, this is color, this is the typography. There's a lot of things. How do the UI components look in the whole context of the applications? There's an interesting topic by Donald Norman. It's a book about the design of everyday things. So it talks a lot about things like affordability. And what I mean with affordability is, well, look at the component we have on screen here. It's a small toggle, and you know exactly what is supposed to happen once you press the small circle in the middle, right? You click it, and it moves from left to right, and something happens in the application. And there's a few things that happen here in your head here. Okay, first you see this, and you automatically know I can press this. And because of the design, which by the way, great job to the designers, it's you have this small circle in the middle, and it is clear to the user the small circle in the middle can move from left to right. And it is clear because the design gives us the hints to that. So it's like a small sphere that is embedded in a small tray, and you can move it from left to right. That's some psychology happening in the background that tells you what is going to happen once I click this button. There's some other things as well. For example, it's clear that when the state of the toggle is on. Typically, you don't have a label underneath the toggle. It's just if it's red, it's on. If it's not on. And this is something called a design language, where in different parts of the application we make clear to the user once something is red, it is considered active or on. And we teach the user that not by actually telling them, but by keeping the same idea throughout the whole application consistent. The user automatically implies, okay, this is red, so it means it's on to me. And this is something the designers actually think about when they do their designs. But is that everything that is important for the actual implementation? And is that everything that that happens behind the scenes? Of course not. There's someone who actually develops that, and that's where I come in. So there's a few things that typically are not in the designs, which is how does that actually look like when you're talking to them? I could of course just flip the switch and it's instant, it's fine, everything works correctly. But is that all that is really required? Does it feel good? And we can talk about what it means when something feels good another time. But you need to give the user some way to see, okay, something is happening, something has happened when I did something in the UI. There's some feedback that I need to give, and what is often missing from the design as well, which is not important in our case, but in a lot of cases by our colleagues in Germany, for example. They design UI components for small hardware that is located in the surgery, in the operating room. And this hardware is very low powered, so there's not a lot of processing power. And they can't actually do a lot of stuff that we do in our application on the desktop. We have processing power, we have graphics cards we can use, we can have fancy animations. They can't. But the designer doesn't know the limitations of that. And the developer does. So there's some sort of friction alone in here that we need to talk about. To show you the examples, so it takes the example in the screen here. I have prepared some small example application. And this is the toggle that I've shown you. And there's a few implementations here that show some quite a lot of differences. So the first one is the obvious implementation. I need to find my mouse. There it is. Which is just, we take the toggle and we toggle it on or off. And it works great. You know what's happening. It feels quite okay. It's clear what it is doing. But is that really all we can do? We can go further than that, of course. We can animate something. We can, for example, animate the whole movement stuff. And this small change, this is a 200 millisecond animation. This whole animation makes the thing feel snappier. You have some feedback, and you know actually, okay, something is moving, something is happening in application. This is the sort of feedback that the user instinctively wants to know, but may not be able to articulate. So there's, I think, quite a bit of difference. Funnily enough, this is faster. Of course, there's no animation. It's faster in theory, but the user prefers typically the animated version. But is that all we can do? No. We can, of course, also animate the colors. And just to compare, it's a bit difficult to see on the screen here, but it just adds this small layer, and you don't really see it, but you instinctively feel it. And I've prepared some example where you can animate it a bit slower to see what's actually happening in the background here. And that just feels right? You look at it and it feels, okay, this is supposed to happen. This is what actually is supposed to happen. And once we showed this our customers, they instinctively went, this is great, this feels amazing, I want that to happen in every component in our software. And this is the problem, because we can't actually do that. In this case, it's very simple to do, but this is not the case for every single component. And this is, of course, where project management comes in and says, well, you can spend 2 hours on this, or you can spend 3 days on it. It looks good in 2 hours, but it looks great in 3 days. And there's another layer of friction there, of course. And one last time. Oh, that's the wrong button. Oh yeah, now it's... yeah. So there's some further challenges we have to think about. This small toggle I've talked about is a very standalone component. There's typically not a lot happening around it and with it. You just toggle it and everything's fine. Something happens somewhere in the application. That's easy. But let's talk about a bit more complex component. It's only slightly more complex. This is, of course, a context menu. We have a small button in the left. When you click it, a small menu pops up with a list of items, and you can click all of those items. We can talk about affordability here. As you can see, one is highlighted, so it means, okay, this is your current selection. The button on the left has an active state. By the way, this is a different design. That's why it's blue instead of red. The button is highlighted. It has blue color in it, and blue is our active color in this design. And you know, okay, this is where I'm currently at. This is my current focus for the user. This is what is supposed to happen when I click that. And it feels instinctively right. Something is open, something is active, something is in front of you once you use the application. But now, what is missing in the design in this case is, again, what actually happens when I click something here. The design just gives us this screen. This is how it's supposed to look. But is that everything? No. What happens when we click on the screen, on the currently selected object, for example? Well, in this case, I think it's quite clear. Click on it, everything closes again. You're done with the selection, and that's it. The whole button on the left is deselected. It's not active anymore. It assumes the same states that the rest of the buttons on the toolbar do, and you're done. But imagine a different case where you actually select several things on the screen. You select something, you want to select a different thing on the same context menu because you have maybe some checkboxes you want to toggle, you want to enable something, you want to write something into the elements in the context menu, and then it's not so clear anymore what happens, and the design doesn't communicate that alone. So in this case, the context menu should stay open. But how do you actually communicate that, okay, this is a context menu, but it behaves differently from what we've taught the user beforehand, because every other context menu works like that. In this case, for example, we could say, well, this is not a context menu. This is actually a menu that pops up. We could add a frame to that. We could add some small animations, a drop shadow behind the context menu that implies, okay, this is a component that is not fleeting, which does not disappear once you click outside, or it has a longer lifespan, so to say. You can actually do something with it, and it does not go away once you're done. Which also implies, of course, that, okay, but how do I close it again? Well, you click outside of it. Maybe there's a small close button on the top right. And this, of course, is something that the designers typically think about. But the use case where you typically implement it and where you typically have this in the application is not so clear at first glance. And once you actually implement it, you can see some challenges that may arise once the actual implementation happens. At CADS, we have two different component libraries. One is for our desktop applications for Windows and for Linux, which is written in C++. We have a design library. We use Qt Quick for our implementation. And it's a great library, but it's not quite as sophisticated as most browser-based libraries in JavaScript are. For example, we have an Angular library as well that is implementing all our UI components for the browser. And we have essentially the same design for our browser applications as we have for the desktop applications. And the challenge here is that sometimes it's not so easy to implement something in one library than it is to implement something in the other library. And while, for example, some object in the browser takes an hour to implement, we have to do everything ourselves because there's no fixed existing component that does the same thing that we're supposed to implement for the design. And sometimes, again, performance is a thing that might be a problem, especially in the browser. when you're working on a week-old PC, which is often the case for our customers, where the client is some surgeon operating on this 20-year-old PC in the clinic, and they do something in the website, and it just doesn't feel right. It takes a while for everything to load. Everything looks fancy, but it's not quick, and it's annoying for the user. But we don't have the same problem on our desktop applications, because we know our customers that use our application have strong PCs because it is required of our software. And again, you sometimes can't do the same UI implementation in the front end, in the browser and in the application. There's another layer of friction. There's something else as well, which talks about complex UI states, where you do something on the screen, but something else automatically happens in the background, and it's clear to the user, for example, in their head. But how do we actually tell the user that something is happening? For example, I press something, and this whole operation takes in the background, because it's a heavy graphical operation, takes a minute. How do we actually show this to the user that, okay, we are working on it, and I can't just block the whole application and just have a progress bar on top? This is not something the user wants, of course. We need to have a small indicator on the bottom. And how the actual indicator works, how it behaves in response to the actual design, is something that the designer often does not and cannot consider, because they don't have a clear idea how the actual algorithm behind it works. Do we have, for example, a percentage progress of a whole application? Is it just, hey, it's done, maybe it's not, it's still working, I don't know. And again, another point of friction that happens that you need to think about. Now, what do we actually do about that? Well, in most cases, we just need to talk with all the people and involve everyone that is relevant to the conversation into the whole process. So the designer does something, we get the customer wants something, the designer implements the design for that, we implement the design, and we show it to the customer. It's a whole feedback loop. And I wrote Agile down here because it's important that this whole process cannot happen once. You need to show them again and again what you've done. You need to show variants. For example, with the toggle switch, the original implementation was just it flips back and forth. And then some developer thought, hey, this does not feel right. This just isn't what it's supposed to happen, right? And spent 2 hours on that, animated the whole thing, and now it works great. We showed that the customer, and they were happy about it. They sang praises to the developer. And those are the small things that you can actually give the customers, and they have immediate feedback. This is something, okay, hey, they actually think about how this application feel. So again, talk with the developers. There's of course something called a design language. I wrote shared language, but it's basically just once you establish something which is supposed to happen, for example, active means red, or in the other design library blue. Stay consistent with it. Don't just switch it up randomly. If it's something that is supposed to be active, show it in the active color. If anything that is supposed to be animated with the same milliseconds of animation time. Animate the color as well, but do it consistently the whole time. Every time you switch it up, something instinctively in your brain is like, nah, something's wrong here. Something's wrong. And again, this is something, a lot of things you can write down. You can create actually this design language, and especially because the designers know this stuff well. This is something that is talked about in a lot of literature, in any education institute that talks about this. This is something that is well established, but the developers often don't. So it is important that you have some conversation. Okay, hey, this is what we intend to do. This is what we intend to communicate when we design things, and the developer must know that this is what the intent is. And again, talk with the customer, because they sometimes feel like, hey, I think I get what you're trying to say with this intent in your design, but it's not actually what it feels like. And at the end of the day, they are going to use the software. They are going to use your product, and keep always in mind that you design for the customer. Yeah, that's about it. I want to give a quick shout out to the actual book I've quoted a bit from today. It's The Design of Everyday Things. It's actually quite old. I think it was released in 1995, but it still holds up as one of the greats. So any topics that mention design, how it feels like, how feedback is supposed to happen, look into that. And other than that, thank you.